Hello and welcome to another episode of the Young Tongues podcast. My name is Barbara Fountain and I am the founder and CEO of the Young Tongues, a peer support charity for young tongue cancer patients. And I am so delighted to bring you a special guest today. I have with me Singaporean actress and fellow young tongue, Janice Koh. Janice, so lovely to have you here. Most people will know you from your appearance in the 2018 film Crazy Rich Asian, which I was in cinemas for when it first came out, and I have since rewatched. I was so excited to go, oh, it's Janice. But for our listeners who've maybe not met you before, we like to get to know everyone beyond the cancer diagnosis. So, who is Janice? Can you introduce yourself?
Well, first of all, Barbara, thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I've been a very big follower of the Young Tongues community. And a little bit about myself. I am an actor and I've been performing for over 30 years, both on stage and on screen. I've also, in the course of my work, which has a lot of the time been in the arts, I have represented the arts in Parliament. So I've been a nominated member of Parliament. It's a little bit like being a senator, I suppose. And I did that for a few years. In my past, I've also worked in the corporate sector of the arts and in government. So I've kind of, in a sense, my career has always been in arts and entertainment, a lot of the time on stage. But I'm also a mom of two boys, and they are 21 and 19. We are all living in Singapore, although I have spent some time in the UK where I've studied. And that's me, the long and short of it. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I am really interested because I can see that you really identify with your work.
Mm.
So when take us back to when you first noticed something wasn't right, and how did the diagnosis impact you in the terms of how you were thinking of processing it, the impact on your personal but also professional life?
I think the timing of the diagnosis was, for me, quite dramatic. It happened in July 2022. And in the months prior to that, I had just done a big one-woman show for an arts festival here in Singapore. I had just been awarded an honor by the French government, and they gave me a knighthood. So what they call it is a chevalier or an order of arts and letters. And it was almost like at a point where I was being celebrated for my work and achievement in the arts. And literally within a month of that happening, I was diagnosed. And the feeling of that was a really hard knock on the head and a big chip taken off my shoulder. It was a wake up for
Mm.
sure. I think, like, possibly with many people who are awaiting a diagnosis, there is a part of you as you are waiting, kind of half expecting bad news. So when I got the diagnosis, I was already bracing
Mm.
for the worst possible outcome. And me being who I am quite a, well, prior to cancer, quite a type A, task-driven kind of person. And I remember going, okay, I've got this. What do I need to do? I'm going to hit the ground running. And literally, in the first 3 days after receiving the diagnosis, I met with 9 oncologists, in
Mm.
my go-getting kind of way, as a way of controlling the uncontrollable. It was a response.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my very initial reaction.
I think a lot of us can relate to that. I remember just wanting to take control of what I could control, knowing that there will come a point where you have to let go. And speaking of the treatment path, so we both know, everyone listening know how physically and emotionally demanding treatment is. I guess what were your outstanding moments thinking back to that time, and how do you feel where did you find the strength to move through it, and how was the experience for you in general?
Oh my gosh, that's such a big question.
I know. About
In many
five
ways,
questions in one.
yeah. In many ways, I'm still processing it, and I always see myself as evolving um, through a journey of acceptance, right? Um, I think at the point of receiving the diagnosis, my first response is, what can I do about it? And arming myself with whatever knowledge and support, medical help that I could find to search for the best way forward. And I still recall um, waking up from surgery, and in that first 24 hours, feeling like the rug had been pulled out from under me, not just in terms of how this illness will impact my life, but feeling quite bereft because it was such a huge punch to who I thought I was and who I'm going to be.
Hmm. With regards to the surgery, do you feel like you had the right expectations in terms of what it would be like waking up on the other side? I mean, I remember being told there's a 50-50 chance you might never speak, which was, a real eye opener. I don't know. Did you feel you knew what was
I think
ahead?
it's different for everyone, right?
Mm,
Depending on what sort of tumor or situation you have in your oral cavity. For me, actually, when I saw a couple of doctors, they identified the abrasion or tumor as being quite small and toward the front of my tongue. And they were like, don't worry about it. It's probably pretty straightforward to treat and you will be able to speak. And you know what? I remember one of my surgeon, my first surgeon, going, no one would be able to tell, Janice, from the outside. You will look exactly the same.
mm,
And I remember thinking, interesting. Looking normal, looking the same. For me, it's like it doesn't really matter as much as whether or not I will sound the same.
yeah, absolutely.
You know, because I think sometimes the medical professionals don't think about the impact it has on how we present ourselves. And it's not just visual,
Mhm.
it's expressive and it's psychological and it's emotional. And so I might look normal, but I don't feel normal, you know. But those initial days was about me wrapping my head around, yes, I know I might survive this medically, physically, but will I survive it emotionally? And I read a lot of writings from inspirational people like Pema Chodron and Thich Nhat Hanh, who were, I found, pillars of support because it really was about learning to accept and learning to start from where I was. all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And I was beginning to understand the how hard that is.
Absolutely. And I don't actually know, but I think you went on and had more treatment after
Yeah,
surgery.
yeah. Interestingly, the harder diagnosis to accept was the second diagnosis post surgery, when they had found that it had spread to lymph nodes, when they had found that the tumor was deeper than they thought, that there was perineal invasion, and therefore, when I sought a second opinion, the second opinion doctors went, Janice, we want to go back in. And that was when I really felt everything crashing down, because I had just spent 4 or 5 weeks thinking that the worst was over.
Mm-hmm.
And now to go in for a second surgery was, I think, the real hard news, the real hard truth. But at that point, it was very clear to me that, I have 2 kids whom I do want to continue being with. And it was very clear in my mind that I would do whatever it took to keep me safe, even if it meant losing my voice altogether. I think that was very clear in my head. Um, and being quite clear about what you want is sometimes helpful,
Yeah.
because I wasn't toddling around, oh, should I not? It was just, yes, go ahead. Take out more if you have to, and I'll go ahead with radiation. Yes, I'll go ahead with chemo, because I just want to live. Um, and not everyone may think that way, but it was very clear to me.
Yeah. I think those choices are really personal as well. And I think there is a difference between, especially amongst us young people, between those who have children and don't have children. So, with me not having children, for me, much more. I was much more willing to take a bigger risk
Mm,
and say, okay, so I didn't have radiation. It was a choice. To be fair, I only had lymph node involvement in one single lymph node, so it wasn't the doctors couldn't decide, so they made me decide, which is like crazy. But I said, okay, actually, I am willing to take that risk. But I also know, had I had children or had I have a family, my decision making would have been completely different. So I
mm-hmm.
think that's the decision making is always deeply personal.
Yeah,
So a second surgery, you heal from that, and then comes I think it's no secret, the dreaded radiation, and by the sounds of it, chemo radiation. Did you have it combined at the same
yeah,
time?
yeah. I did that at the same
Ooh,
time.
that's tough.
Um, when I think back to that time of my life, which was about 3 months, 3 months in a very pre-cancer was not a long time at all, but it felt like forever when you're going through cancer treatment. And yet, when I look back at it now, I was I felt like I was at peace. I felt like I was happy almost. And I know it sounds very ironic, but it kind of reminded me of that first few months of being in lockdown and COVID. And sometimes I tell people, COVID prepared me for cancer treatment, because it felt like I was kind of, again, being a bit like a hermit and giving myself time to be on my own, to recalibrate, reflect, recharge, renew, with no expectations of what's going to happen except to live this day.
Mm,
Um, And I don't remember any other time in my life where I've had so much time to spend with people I love, either my family or people who had come to visit me. I don't remember any other time in my life where people were so kind to me and attentive and listening. And also a time in my life where every waking moment I was very grateful for that moment, to be alive, to be the fact that I had an option, that I had a recovery option, that I had a treatment option. So yes, there was pain for sure, but I tried my best to focus on what I can do and what was within my control now, and leave the tomorrow to tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We hear that a lot, and I think when we have individuals post in the community and ask for help to get through those periods, it's very much take one moment at a time, make it to the next moment. And I totally connect with your philosophy of trying to. It's bizarre, being grateful to have a treatment option, which in head and neck cancer isn't always the case.
Yeah.
It is a really strong point. So after completing radiation, we know radiation doesn't quite stop. It takes a long time to recover. Now, as someone whose identity is in your voice, has a lot to do with your voice, how did you approach rehabilitation and healing?
Hmm. So for me, um, a sense of positivity and a way forward, I helped to develop in myself by making sure that I had a support system while I was going through treatment. And that for me was important for my mental health because of just who I am and how I move through the world. So even though there was a lot of uncertainty around how this would turn out, how the treatment would turn out, I wanted for myself a sense of agency around what I can do,
Mm-hmm.
which is make sure I had enough sleep, make sure I was hydrated, make sure I ate well whenever I could eat, and then establish a relationship with a therapist. I found also a speech therapist. I found a coach so that I had people who could help me along the way wherever I needed it. I have a yoga practice and I've been practicing yoga for more than 20 years. It has been fundamental in my treatment and recovery simply because yoga has taught me to just show up on the mat and not have any expectation of what I can do today, but have a trust that if I show up every day, I will get there. I will get better. I will make progress. And in the same way, that's how I approach my recovery. I have to show up at radiation. Yes, it's painful. Let's just show up today. I have to show up for physiotherapy. Just show up. I have to do my speech therapy exercise. Just do it. And in a very interesting way, that agency gave me a lot of calm and a sense of control in a very chaotic time and environment. Um, that was an anchor in itself. Layered with that, um, I did a lot of journaling. So I wrote every day about what I was feeling. I meditated every day because it is a time where your mind's going crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Your heart is in pulling in all directions. there's so much uncertainty, and it was the only way to keep my nervous system regulated. And I did whatever I can to do that. Um, and now, post treatment and all that, I continue to do that because I realized, wow, how useful some of these tools were for anyone, not just people
Mm.
going through cancer, but anyone going through struggle in their lives, to be able to have 10 minutes of quiet, 15 minutes of writing, or take a long walk and breathe were all very important tools for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. I started therapy after treatment, and I couldn't imagine life without a therapist now. I just think it's so helpful for so many different aspects of my life. And I sometimes feel like, oh, I wish I had the therapist, back when I was dealing just with everyday stuff before
Yeah.
cancer. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely lots of lessons taken out of the experience. So
Yeah. But I
um,
went off track, Barbara, because I know you talked about identity. I'm sorry I didn't answer that
that's all
question.
right. I was going to come back to it.
um, in Singapore, um, I'm in a way a public figure. People know me. And I knew from the get go there was no hiding. And my voice will change, my voice has changed. And that motivated me to speak openly about what I was going through.
Mm,
And when I did that, it was very liberating. Not only because I could be who I was, but also because there was a wave of support which I
mm,
needed to rely on.
mm,
And I'm the kind of person who feels like when I am able to share with close friends and family or colleagues, I feel better. And that support system kind of really helped to carry me through a difficult time.
mm,
But also being able to talk about it gave me the freedom to transform and evolve and own um, the change that I was going through in a public way, nonetheless, but in my own way. I think that if I had kept it under wraps, I might have just disappeared, into I don't know what it would have been like, but I just can't imagine not sharing my journey.
mm,
And in sharing my journey, showing that I'm coming to accept it, people were also accepting me. And it was so freeing.
mm, mm. I, you know what, were exactly the questions and thoughts that I've had for over the last couple of years since I've been following you on Instagram as well. Because I was thinking, oh my God, you are a public figure and your work is public. Um, and I always wondered if there ever was a fear there that maybe the diagnosis and the changes that would come with it would in some ways be a barrier for you to go back and do the work that you love doing, not from yourself but from the outside world. And we know of other actors around the world who've had head and neck cancer who kept it secret, who didn't come out until years later. um, so that's always played on my mind, and I was always in so much awe when I've seen some of the media that you've done on behalf of our community to spread awareness and also share your story. And I was so in awe of going, wow, you're so open, and it's really refreshing to see how open you are. But I do wonder if it comes with a flip side. Is there, I assume culture in Singapore is different to like
Mm,
media culture here in the UK, which can be very
mhm.
intrusive. I don't know what that experience, how did you weigh that up, and how did you make sure you had healthy boundaries in place?
I think the only reservation I had about being open about my own medical journey is being defined by it.
Mm,
I think that's the only reservation I had. But in the larger scheme of things, it didn't really bother me because the people who know who I am and what I am and what I can or cannot do, they are the most important people in my life anyway, and they know. So how you want to perceive me, it doesn't matter. I don't really care.
Mm,
I think what's more important is that I think of my identity now as buckets, right? I am not one thing. I
mm,
am not Janice the actor. I'm not Janice the Crazy Rich Asians actress. I'm not Janice the parliamentarian. I am all these things. I'm also Janice the mom. I'm also the Janice who is a daughter and a really good friend. And there are many aspects to me, and cancer patient or slash survivor, tongue cancer survivor is one of those buckets.
mm,
And we are all complex. And I want to show all these different aspects of me and not be afraid of being seen.
mm,
But maybe it's also because I am a performer and I am used to being seen
mm,
and almost used to being judged that I feel a bit less afraid of taking that risk. But I don't expect it to be easy for anyone
mm,
to say, look at me, this is who I am. This is part of who I am now.
mm.
I but having taken that on, I actually feel more empowered by that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. I love the bucket analogy. I need that because I guess at the moment I'm very much Barbara the tongue cancer Young Tongues
Mm-hmm.
founder, and I myself sometimes forget. Oh, I'm also Barbara the wife and Barbara the daughter and Barbara who likes football and does other
Yeah.
things. So I love that. I love that analogy. We've just touched on um, some of the work that you've done since since cancer, I guess, or after your diagnosis. If we first, I just want to touch on the work that you've done in terms of creating awareness. And I can't tell you, I think this was before you were part of the Facebook group. But
Mm-hmm.
when you did the Vogue shoot, the buzz, because we were all sharing it and going like, look at that, it's amazing. What was it like for you re-entering into that, I guess, like glossy magazine? Going from hospital to a photo shoot seems like two very different worlds coming together.
Mm, how funny, because when I think back to that Vogue interview, it was only 10 months out.
Mm,
I was still a mess, to be honest. But I was a beautiful mess in that I was allowing myself to be all over the place.
mm,
When I did, I mean, what you saw on Instagram was maybe a video shoot of uh, 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 a very, very short exchange. But the truth is, prior to that, for the Vogue article, we literally went for almost a hour long, 90-minute interview on Zoom. It was on Zoom. And I was crying throughout the interview, you
mm,
know, because it was so soon after my treatment. And yes, I was on the road to recovery, but I was still very much processing what all this means to me, what all this
mm,
means for me. And Chandra, who was my interviewer, was, you know, I was just, I just felt so lucky to have a platform to talk about what I was going through.
mm,
In a way, I was grateful for it almost because she gave me a chance to try and articulate it. And so what you saw was just someone who was very raw. Now talking to you, and I've done so many interviews since, it's a lot more process, a lot more, um, a little bit more distant from where I was, and maybe a sense of where I am now. There's a lot more reflection that has happened. But when I spoke to Vogue, I was still almost like holding on for dear life and
mm,
going, I hope I'll be okay.
mm.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just remember for us, it was such a beacon because, in the sense that, well, I don't know if you feel the same, but before I got diagnosed with tongue cancer, I didn't know tongue cancer, oral cancer, head and neck cancer, that was even a thing. I was like, what? Um, so I was diagnosed in 2019, and then you go onto Google and you try and find other people. And, I remember quite early on wanting to raise awareness, and someone said to me, oh, there must be a celebrity, someone well known who's had tongue cancer. And I was like, well, not Van Halen, but he's a bit old, it's not quite the same. And then to see someone who's of similar age, who's a woman, who has had a career and a success, and has, it was an identity. It was like, yes, finally being able to see someone
Mm.
giving tongue cancer a platform, so to speak, and raising awareness. So no, we loved it, even though it was 10 months out. But what a brave thing to do. What have your highlights been since then, in terms of the experiences that you've had in like giving? Because you've just said you've given quite a lot of interviews. Have there been some highlights and some lowlights of things that you go, oh, that thing worked really well, this I wouldn't probably do anymore? Or
I mean, at any given time in the past 2.5 years, whenever I talk about my journey, it's a capture of who I am at that point. I don't really prepare what I want to say or what I want to advocate. I share what I'm going through at that moment and reflect back from that vantage point. That's all. Um, and I always say yes to sharing because I know how lonely it is and desperate sometimes going through it. And um, I remember being in bed every night and being on my computer. It's probably a very bad thing. Searching for whoever, whatever was out there that could give me an inkling of how it's gonna go, you
yes.
know? So I feel I need to pay it forward, and if it helps one person, great.
Mm,
Yeah.
absolutely. So speaking of work, you have been up to some really exciting stuff lately, and I want you to basically introduce us. How has the last few years? How did you progress back onto stage? Um, was it a fairly quick process? Did it come expected? Was it unexpected? How did you go
Yeah,
about it?
that's a really good question. I think um, when I had my surgery, my knee-jerk reaction is, I can't do this no more. No, no, I can't go on stage and speak like this. It's not possible, and I'm not going to hang on to it. I'm not going to pretend I will. I'm not going to make it a challenge. I have nothing to prove.
Mm,
And I think that um, in and of itself, I would say to my me back then, hey, never say never, but I kind of needed to, it's like a breakup. I kind of needed to rip away from any expectation
mm,
that we were going to get back together, me and acting. And so many people around me were like, no, you're going to go back. You'll be fine. I can hear you clearly. And I think you should go back. And I didn't know how much of that was about comfort or a sense of people around me also not being able to let go. But I knew for me, I had to let go. I had to detach. And even after a year, where the possibility of going back on stage was still there, I continued to say no. And there were people who said, oh, come back and I've got a role for you. And I said no. And it was not because I didn't believe in myself, it was because I did want to not be attached to my comfort zone. I did want to remove myself from feeling I had to prove that I had come back.
Yeah.
There's nothing to come back to. Things have changed. I don't want to go back. So I want to move forward. And that framing and that psychological place took time. So in that time period, in the last 2 years, I decided that I would do stuff to learn new skills and go into slightly uncomfortable places. So I learned Japanese. I learned to be a voice teacher. So right now I'm going through my certification to be a Fitzmaurice voice work teacher. And you would think, what? This woman with tongue cancer and is struggling to speak clearly wants to be a voice teacher. And I'm like, let's go there. Let's go to where it's difficult. And let's start with beginner's eyes, because if anything, I need to learn what it's like to be uncomfortable. I am uncomfortable. And that is a way of exercising and getting used to wearing a new set of clothes, really. And it was only when I found a lot more stability that I could say yes to going back on stage again. And even then, so I've just come off a run of a show. Even then, I only said yes when I felt it was within certain conditions that would keep me safe. And one of them was I wanted to go back to a show that I loved with people that I love. So it would make it fun.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to a show that I knew and I had done before, and that I knew what was expected of me, so that it wasn't too stressful. And finally, I wanted to go back to a show where I only had to do one show a day. And this was suggested to me by my second surgeon, actually, who said, hey, I want to see you back on stage. And I'm like, hey, it's going to be very tiring because I have to use this mouth and tongue for a couple of hours. And if I do 2 shows a day, I'll be exhausted. And he said, I'll write you a memo. I'll write you a memo to say you can only do 1 show a day. How does that sound? And I'm like, oh, okay. And when I approached the theatre companies, they're like, sure,
Yeah.
we want you back. And if it's 1 show a day, so be it. And in a way, to have that kind of support, I could not say no. And so going back on stage wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about rising up to any challenge. It was coming back to a place that I loved. And let me tell you, reflecting on the last 6 weeks doing the show and doing the rehearsal, I was in love. I was in love. It was coming back to an old flame almost, and enjoying myself again in a way that I haven't in a long time.
Yeah, as a fellow theatre kid, I used to love when we did short runs. I was very young, and I remember, yeah, when theatre is fun, it's amazing. It's got this energy. It's almost a bit of a bubble. How do you feel coming out of it now? I remember I was being terribly depressed when it all ended, and being incredibly sad.
They call it production blues, but I'm so happy I did it for a number of reasons. One, to get it out of my system. There's one thing about saying, oh, what if, should I go back? Could I go back? And now I've gone back and I survived. And secondly, I now feel I can really move on to other things because I did go back and give it a shot. I was actually afraid at first that I wouldn't enjoy it. I was afraid that being on stage, I would be so self-conscious about my voice. But therein lies the beauty of having waited it reached a point where I was so used to my voice that by the time I went on stage, um, I didn't really think about it anymore. And I could really let go and enjoy and believe that once the audience got used to the sound, they also forgot that I sounded different and
Mm.
became immersed in the narrative and the story and the character. Um, it was very empowering. And now that I've done that, uh, it's something which is like, okay, great. Will I go back? Maybe. But do I want to explore other things? Yeah, for sure.
That's a brilliant segue to my last question, which is really, you say it's been a long time, but actually it's only been 3 years since a diagnosis, which is still, still at very early days. I guess my question is for you, reflecting back on everything that you've learned and everything that has come into your life because of cancer in a positive way. Um, what are your hopes for the future? How does current Janice feel about the next 3 years?
Oh gosh. To be honest, I find it very hard to think too long ahead.
Mm.
I don't know if other people feel that way, but I remember in the first 2 years of diagnosis, I couldn't even plan a holiday more than 6 months ahead. I was too scared that I would have to cancel flights if anything were to happen. And now I carry with me a very healthy dose of my mortality, I think. Um, I still don't plan more than a year ahead. Um, I I think I am a lot more present to what's in front of me. And when people ask, I go, well, whatever comes, comes. If I want to take a risk today and do something different, I will. But I'm not going to put off things which I've always wanted to do. I'm not going to put it off if I can help it. And I'm not going to have too much expectations, really.
Mm.
I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but for me, it's how I live now. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I actually, I'm just now thinking back to 3 years, to my 3 year mark, and I couldn't look far ahead, bearing in mind that I had stage one. So, yeah, I think for me, things started to shift last year, year five, now year six. I'm starting to think, but maybe
Mm.
also it's having the charity, and I need to sit down and do a strategic plan for the next 5 years. And I'm like, oh, okay. Never not had to think like that in a long time. So, what I find really interesting is how normalities have started to creep back in.
Mm.
So, I sometimes look back to Barbara version in year two or year three, or even in year one, and I go, "Ooh, there are some aspects where I'd love to pull them back and have them again." I remember after the diagnosis and for the first 9 months feeling so present. Like I'd never had that feeling in my life before. I was always chasing something, but it was the first time in my life where I could just be, like what you described. And now I'm back on the hamster wheel. I sometimes go, no, Barbara, remember, just be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. It's like COVID and post-COVID,
yes,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, even now when I try and get together with five close friends, it's like we can't even find a date. And I would text back and go, "Hi guys, remember COVID?
Yeah.
Yeah, can we have a bit of that back where we
Yeah.
could just meet up?" And I even at now and going into the third year, I already feel that I've been very busy, and I do try and remind myself that not everything is equally important,
Mm.
um, and remember to appreciate the now. I think it's a very important lesson, and keeping up with the writing, journaling, meditation keeps me honest.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And what a fantastic note to end on. Janice, thank you so much for joining us and being part of the community. We really appreciate you. And let's hope we can do this again, maybe in 3 years' time, and see where Janice is in 3 years' time.
Thank you
Lovely.
very much, Barbara. It's been lovely talking to you, and thank you for giving me a platform to share.
Thank you. And to our listeners, thank you so much for being with us again today. Don't forget, if you'd like to come onto the podcast and share your story, or if you have an expert you'd like us to recommend, or if you have a topic you'd like us to speak about, please email us on podcast@youngtonguesglobal.com. Thank you so much. Have a great week. Bye-bye.